Welcome back to the Crimson Creed podcast. Sam and Chris here in person this time. Chris is visiting Norman for the Christmas and New Year's holiday week.
Mm-hmm.
How are you doing, Chris? How are you enjoying it?
Well, would have enjoyed it a lot more if OU had won, but it's
Yeah,
good to be back.
it is. It's good to be back. That OU game for sure was a hard one to watch as it got later in the game. Jalil Farouk, the fumble that he had there at the end of the third quarter got taken back. That was kind of the turning point in a 38-24 loss to Arizona. Chris, what stuck out to you most about this game?
You know, what stuck out to me the most is how most of the issues we're having are coachable, fixable mistakes. So like Jackson Arnold's interceptions, all three of them were kind of bad, but they're ones that he has 8 months to go back and look at and say, oh, well, here's what I could have done differently. Now let me spend the next 4 hours with my receivers working just this one throw. And so it could help prevent more interceptions that way in the future. Uh, I saw that our defense, while they didn't have meaningful pressure the first half of the game, they really adjusted well in the second half of the game, and that told me that there's a lot of growth going on there. There's a lot of potential and a lot of coachable things that we can have fixed. But it might be a difficult start to the year next year.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And to look at one bright spot from the game, Jackson Arnold hit some crazy throws. He hit the one to Nick Anderson, obviously down by the goal line. The toe drag catch from Nick Anderson,
Yeah,
which I didn't get a chance to see Sports Center the next morning. But if it wasn't the number one top 10 play,
it should have
what
been.
was, right? He hit that one. He hit Brennan Thompson way back behind the defense, and was this close to hitting Jaden Gibson inbounds on the left sideline at one point for another deep shot. So some really good, promising things there from Jackson Arnold. Like you said, he's got some months now to figure these out, get into a little bit of a rhythm, and really be set moving into the SEC. So some of the transfer portal action that we've seen has created kind of an interesting dynamic for next season.
Yeah.
Missouri, number one, not a team I would consider one of our rivals, right?
Nope.
Pretty lopsided record of victory there.
That's one way of
But
putting it.
between the Williams Nwaneri recruitment and Caden Green's transfer out to Missouri,
Yeah.
it's created a little bit more bad blood than may have already been there between Oklahoma and Missouri.
Most definitely. And it's funny hearing fans of a team like that try and talk so much trash when we've dominated them throughout history. Anytime they've ever had a good team and they thought, oh, we can really do something with it, here comes Oklahoma to ruin the day. And so not only have we dominated them over time, but also, yeah, they're putting together a nice few things right now, but I think Missouri is kind of our out of nowhere team for this season. That's a good team for a little bit, but they don't have the coaching staff to sustain it. We see this every year where a team just kind of comes out of nowhere. They do really well. They put a lot of things together. They have a great season, and then the next year they're 4-8 again. And I'd be shocked if Missouri finished next year with a winning record.
Well, hey, Missouri did beat Ohio State last night, 14-3. Chris, have some respect for the Tigers. Put some respect on their name, right?
Man, without Marvin Harrison Jr., I think we saw that that Ohio State this year is just Iowa in scarlet uniforms.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to see kind of who becomes our in conference rival aside from Texas. You move to a conference and you kind of establish some new rivalries, some new annual fights. We kind of had one going with Kansas State these last few years in the Big 12, after Chris Kleiman took over up in Manhattan.
I'm not gonna lie, I'm relieved that we don't have to play them every year anymore.
Yeah.
I hated playing them. I hated it.
Yeah. But gonna be exciting. Lost Tawee Walker to Wisconsin yesterday, the day after the game. I know he was in the transfer portal, and fans weren't really sure whether he was just kind of testing the waters or if he was really looking to get out of Dodge, find a new fit where maybe he can land a scholarship. And that ultimately is what he was looking to do. He's a Wisconsin Badger. It's kind of a popular transfer destination.
For OU players,
We saw Nick Evers, I believe, last season transfer out to Wisconsin. And
Tanner
then,
Mordecai.
yeah, and then Tawi Walker goes out there. So,
Do you see Mordecai staying another year?
mm-mm,
I didn't know
no,
he had another year of eligibility, but he announced that he's going to finish his collegiate career next year at Wisconsin.
I feel like since COVID, um, quarterback eligibility is just off the charts.
Tom Brady is about to announce he's returning for one last season to Michigan.
Yeah. Well, as we look to the bowl games that we've had going, today we had Ole Miss really put away
Dominate.
a talented but not very good Penn State team. I think we saw a few times this year that Penn State was very easily shaken, very malleable, especially offensively for a defense. So got to see some of that. And Georgia and Florida State right now going at it. Florida State's had a nice few plays defensively. They got the strip sack on Carson Beck earlier. And just a little bit ago, they hit Florida State hit a deep shot down the field. They only turned it into 3. Not going to work. You're going to have to get touchdowns if you're going to beat Georgia.
Yeah, it looks like they just scored another touchdown. Georgia did. It's 21-3 now.
But you're going to have to beat. You're going to have to score touchdowns to beat Georgia. So, and there's a fumble that Georgia just actually recovered on the kickoff. So it's going to be a good time if you're in Tallahassee today.
Unless it's about to become 28-3. We all know what happens when that score comes up.
Fair enough. Fair enough. As we look ahead to the rest of the weekend, Chris, we got the playoff matchups coming up on Monday. Texas and Washington playing in the Sugar Bowl. We got Alabama and Michigan in the Rose Bowl. For Texas and Washington, this one looks pretty cut and dry to me. Michael Penix and Washington are extremely talented, very good offensively. Their defense is pretty good. But for me, Texas is far and away the better team here. I think Vegas right now has Texas winning this one on a 4-point spread last I saw. But Washington's going to have their work cut out for them. I've got Quinn Ewers and the Texas offense playing a very complementary game alongside the Texas defense. And you're going to have Texas come out of this one 38-21 over Washington.
I think that Texas has all the potential and ability in the world to go out and win this game, maybe even dominate this game. But here's the thing. Washington, all they had to do this season was just fall apart in one game. That's all they needed to do. They had a pretty big deficit against Oregon in the regular season, and they ended up winning that game. They were struggling against Arizona State. They won that game. Going into the Pac-12 championship, people were saying, "Oh, Oregon's gotten so much better. There's no way they lose that game." Washington dominated them. It was a close game score-wise, but they dominated them. It was never close. They went to a game against USC where they knew they'd have to put up 50 points, and they did. Their defense eventually figured out Caleb Williams and shut him down, and it's just they keep getting into these scenarios where their team needs different things, and every time the team responds. And I think Washington is kind of this year's TCU, where it just doesn't seem like there's a team who can beat them. I think that defense that Washington has put together, especially the defensive line, is going to be too much for Quinn Ewers. That secondary is really good. And I don't think Texas has the secondary to handle one of the best quarterbacks in the country with arguably the best wide receiver group in the country. I mean, this Washington team is just ridiculously loaded, and they know how to do exactly what they need to do in games. When they couldn't score against Arizona State, they didn't allow scores. When they had to score every drive against USC, they did. And when they had to have complimentary football twice against Oregon, guess what? They did. So I have Washington winning this one 35-21.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. You've got Washington. I've got the Horns. Regardless of that difference, I think the thing that we have in common with every other Oklahoma fan in the state, in the country, is that we are Washington Husky fans on Monday.
Yes.
Go Huskies. Please take care of business. Please prove me wrong on this. Send Texas home crying back to their steaks.
Wouldn't it be great if they had a carbon copy game of Red River? Oh, if any Texas fans are watching this, don't forget we beat you this year. But wouldn't it be great if it was a carbon copy thing? Texas takes a lead on a late field goal. Michael Penix goes down and scores a game-winning touchdown with like 10 seconds left.
It would be exciting. I will say these two semifinal games this year are about the most evenly matched set that we have had in a while,
I think
really.
since 2017.
Yeah. When you look at the quality of the teams there, there's no pity team. Granted, last year, looking at TCU, TCU ended up being a formidable opponent for Michigan in the semifinal. Georgia obviously killed them, but initially they were looked at as kind of a pity opponent. Obviously not what they ended up being that first round.
No.
You had Cincinnati a couple years ago. You had Oklahoma, arguably, in 2019 against the LSU squad that was so powerful. There's really just no pity team in this one this year. So
No.
it's going to be interesting. I think when you look across the kind of across the country to the Rose Bowl, Bama and Michigan, this one's going to be a defensive slugfest. Neither offense is just stellar, right? Michigan's got some solid firepower, good receivers. They've got a really nice running back in Donovan Edwards, I believe.
Yes. The Don.
So we've got him. Alabama's had some more consistent play from Jalen Milroe down the stretch than they had earlier in the season when he was allowed to play a full game this second half of the season. But I think ultimately you've got a defensive slugfest. This game's going to be won at the line of scrimmage. This is classic Saban ball. I think Alabama is going to control this one start to finish in a 28-10 whomping of Michigan.
I agree that it's going to be a Wampin, and I agree that I can't believe I just said the word Wampin. And I agree that it's also going to be Nick Saban's type of game. I think Jalen Milroe is due for like a real breakout game because he's looked good throughout the season. He's improved by miles since that fluke of a loss against Texas. And that offensive line for Alabama, they have grown so much this year. We saw against the best defensive line they faced all year in Georgia. There were plays where Georgia could not gain an inch. They were pushed back on pass plays. They were pushed back and they couldn't gain an inch. And we've seen the Alabama offensive line become a real formidable force. And I don't think Michigan has the defense to keep up with it. And JJ McCarthy, as nice as he plays in Big Ten play, I don't think he can keep up with Alabama's defense. I don't think he'll be able to consistently perform throughout the game. He'll probably play well for a little bit, but not for all 60 minutes. I have what are they called? Alabama winning this game 38-21.
Okay, well, we'll see how it goes. Turning back to OU real quick before we wrap things up here. Breakout players for next year. I just want to talk about a couple that we want to watch going into next year. I think from the defensive side, for me, we've got PJ Adebawore. He had a nice first season here. Next year is going to be fantastic for him. Having
Yes.
David Stone on the line with him, having a couple of the defensive line guys that we've got returning for final seasons with the Sooners. A lot of experience, a lot of depth that we're going to have on the line. He's going to be a force to be reckoned with, and seeing him go in there with David Stone is going to be really, really exciting. Who do you have breaking out next year on breakout watch, I guess?
For the defense, I'm going to have to go with Peyton Bowen. Look at the jump Billy Bowman has made each year. Billy Bowman in year one, he made some nice plays. He kind of had a year similar to what Peyton Bowen did this year. He had some nice plays, forced a couple big things, but would also blow some coverages. Wasn't the best tackler, et cetera, et cetera. Year two, Billy Bowman starts off the season slow, but in the final like 3 games of the season, he gets like 3 interceptions. He got one against Baylor. He got one against Oklahoma State. He got one against Florida State. And then we all know how stellar of a year he had this year, where he was robbed of the Thorpe Award. I think Peyton Bowen is going to make a similar jump. Peyton Bowen looked better in year one than Billy Bowman did in year one. And I think Peyton Bowen, he's going to have a year under his belt. He's going to know what he did well, what he needs to work on, and he's going to have 8 months to fix that, as opposed to learning how to play college from high school. He's now learning how to play year 2 of college from year 1. And so I think he's in a great position to break out, especially with how loaded our secondary is going to be next year. On the offensive side, I think there's a clear pick in Jackson Arnold, so I'm going to go with the less clear pick in the transfer from Purdue, Deion Burks. He had a great year at Purdue, wide receiver, has a couple years of eligibility left. We saw what Andrew Anthony did in 1 year of our system before he got injured against Texas. I think Deion Burks is going to have a similar season.
Deion Burks will be in for a year. The one I'm going to be interested to see far and away is Jackson Arnold.
Yes.
And his connection with Nick Anderson.
That looked good the other night.
That's your breakout thing, I think, for the offense is the Jackson Arnold wide receiver combination. And Nick Anderson is going to be his guy. Dylan Gabriel was Drake Stoops.
Yeah.
6 days a week and twice on Sunday, Dylan Gabriel would find Drake Stoops.
Or Marvin Mims last year.
Yeah, in key situations, close games. But he would also find him just for the early big play to get off to a hot start. I think that's where we go from there. No doubt going to be an exciting year for the Sooners. Moving into the SEC, going to have our work cut out for us, especially these first couple of years. Adapting to that level of competition and getting the chance to bring in some of the guys that we have from recruiting as our defensive reputation stacks back up from what it was the last few years. I think we're seeing a lot of the effects of that already with the defensive recruiting we're on. So it's really exciting. And looking forward to being here with you guys to kind of share this, talk through it, and break it down. As we look ahead to the coming months, we're out of football season now, obviously. We do cover all Sooner sports, but this is primarily a football podcast. So at least until August, we're going to go on a monthly cadence. As events require it, we may do additional episodes in the interim. If OU ends up in the Final Four, for example, in March Madness, that'd be worth discussing, right? Or if our softball team makes it back to the World Series.
Maybe if our baseball team goes to Omaha.
Probably more of when our softball team makes it back to the World Series.
Honestly.
And if there's any pertinent football news, recruiting, coaching, players, anything else like that, we'll be here. But at least until August, expect a monthly podcast from us near the end of each month. We appreciate you guys, our viewers. We're really excited to be here with you. Here's to another season under the belt now. And let's look ahead to next season. Enjoy the offseason. Be safe. And Boomer Soon.